In the heart of Eastern Europe, a conflict rages that has drawn global attention. This is a tale of two nations, Ukraine and Russia, bound together by a shared history yet divided by a tumultuous present. Nestled between Russia to the east and rest of Europe to the west, Ukraine finds itself at the crossroads of historical, cultural and political influences. This strategic location has made it a battlefield for power, control and ideologies. It's important to understand that the roots of the conflict we see today run deep, entwined in a history that goes back centuries. Ukraine and Russia, both integral parts of the former Soviet Union, have had a complex relationship. When the Soviet Union disintegrated in 1991, Ukraine declared its independence, sparking a new chapter in their shared history. The road to independence was far from smooth for Ukraine. Struggling to create a new national identity distinct from Russia, Ukraine found itself grappling with economic challenges, political instability, and the push and pull of influences from both the West and the East. At the heart of the strained relations between Ukraine and Russia lies a fundamental difference in their historical narratives and national identities. Russia, steeped in its imperial past, views Ukraine as an integral part of its sphere of influence, an extension of its own self. Ukraine, on the other hand, yearns to carve out a distinct identity, aspiring to integrate with the European Union and the wider Western world. This divergence in their paths has led to a series of conflicts and crises over the years. The annexation of Crimea by Russia in 2014 marked a significant escalation in their relations, setting the stage for the ongoing conflict we see today. The stage was set, the players ready, and the world watched as the tension escalated. The flames of conflict were ignited and the world was thrust into a new era of geopolitical tension. The stage was set in 2014, when Russia's annexation of Crimea sparked a fire that would eventually engulf eastern Ukraine. This was not a simple dispute over territory, it was a complex and multifaceted conflict that would test the mettle and strategies of both nations. On one side, we had Russia, wielding its military might with an iron fist. Russian ground forces, although approaching exhaustion, were relentless in their pursuit, yet their strength was not without limits. They had committed a majority of their army battalions to the conflict, with a significant number described as combat ineffective. Despite this, they held a trump card: air superiority. Their air force was robust, posing a significant threat to Ukraine's defenses. On the other side, we saw Ukraine outmatched but undeterred. They were faced with a daunting task: to defend their nation against a formidable adversary. Their air defenses were depleted, making them vulnerable to Russian aerial attacks. But they were not without their own strategies. They prepared for an offensive, relying on their fielded armored vehicles and exploiting Russian weaknesses. In the midst of the conflict, deception became a crucial weapon. Ukraine turned to cunning ruses and opportunistic attacks, outsmarting Russia on the battlefield. They exploited Russian communication equipment shortages and used personal phone data to detect their positions. They even created decoys to mislead Russian forces, demonstrating remarkable adaptability and innovation on the ground. Yet these strategies were not without their risks. Leaked documents revealed details on the training and equipping of Ukrainian brigades for a counter-offensive, potentially providing useful intelligence to Russian commanders. As the conflict unfolded, the world watched with bated breath. The stakes were high, and the consequences far-reaching. The war was not expected to end within the year, and both sides were preparing for the next phase of the conflict. The conflict was far from over, and the world braced for the impact. As the conflict continued, its ripples were felt far beyond the borders of Ukraine and Russia. The struggle between these two nations morphed into a global standoff, the consequences of which reverberated across the four corners of the earth. The economic impact was significant and immediate. Both nations found themselves in a precarious position, with Russia's ground forces nearing exhaustion and Ukraine's air defenses severely depleted. Russian military resources dwindled, with a considerable number of their troops deemed combat ineffective. The war's toll on the economy was felt worldwide as nations grappled with the fallout of disrupted trade and increased military expenditure. But perhaps the most telling sign of the global impact was the international community's response. Major international players like the United Nations, European Union, and NATO found themselves in a delicate balancing act. They had to navigate the fine line between diplomatic intervention and respect for national sovereignty. The conflict sparked an intense debate about the role of these organizations in maintaining international peace and security. The repercussions were not merely economic or political. The humanitarian crisis that unfolded was heartbreaking and far-reaching. The war left a trail of destruction, impacting countless lives and leaving the world grappling with a refugee crisis of an unprecedented scale. The echoes of this conflict reached far beyond the immediate warring parties, touching lives in every corner of the globe. The sports world was also not immune. The International Ice Hockey Federation suspended Russian and Belarusian teams from its competitions. This move was mirrored by FIFA, UEFA, and the International Olympic Committee, who also suspended Russian athletes from international events. These decisions highlighted the conflict's far-reaching implications, even in areas seemingly disconnected from the political and military sphere. The conflict also led to a significant shift in global alliances. There were indications of clandestine deals and secret partnerships. There were suggestions that China was secretly supplying lethal equipment to Russia, and Russia was seeking weapons from Egypt, using private military companies to obtain weapons from Turkey. In the end, the conflict served as a stark reminder of our interconnected world. It proved that no conflict is local in our globalized era. It showed that a battle between two nations could have profound implications on the international stage, affecting economies, politics, humanitarian efforts, and even sports. The world was left to grapple with the consequences of a conflict that seemed to have no end in sight. In the face of adversity, Ukraine showcased a masterclass in strategic deception. Indeed, the war between Russia and Ukraine was not just a clash of arms, but a real-life theater of strategic maneuvering, cunning ruses, and opportunistic attacks. Despite being outnumbered and outgunned, Ukraine managed to hold its ground against the Russian forces. How did they manage such a feat? The answer lies in their masterful use of deception and improvisation. The Ukrainian forces, recognizing their disadvantages, turned to their wits and cunning to outsmart the Russian forces. Ukraine's tactics were as varied as they were ingenious. For instance, they used right-hand drive trucks with dummies on the left side to deceive snipers. They exploited the fact that Russian troops were using personal phones due to communication equipment shortages. This allowed them to detect their positions and launch missile strikes. But it didn't stop there. The Ukrainians also created decoys, including fake howitzers, mortars, and radars, to mislead Russian forces. This clever use of feints and decoys not only confused the Russian forces, but also bought the Ukrainians precious time and resources. One of the most striking examples of Ukraine's strategic brilliance was their counteroffensive in Kharkiv. Ukraine signaled a push towards Kherson, effectively diverting the attention and redeployment of Russian troops. This allowed Ukraine to retake territory surrounding Kharkiv, demonstrating that sometimes the best defense is a good deception. The Ukrainian forces showed that war is not just about firepower and numbers. It is also about strategy, planning, and the ability to adapt and innovate on the fly. Their successful use of deception and ruses underscores the importance of strategic thinking in warfare. On this battlefield, it wasn't just about who had the most soldiers or the biggest guns. It was about who had the sharpest minds and the most cunning plans. The battlefield became a chessboard where strategic brilliance often trumped brute strength. In this digital age, technology played a crucial role in the conflict. The Russian-Ukrainian conflict has shown us that warfare is no longer limited to the battlefield. Instead, it has permeated the digital realm, making each click, each post, and each byte a potential weapon. The Ukrainian forces, for instance, have shown great adaptability and innovation in the face of adversity. Despite being outnumbered and outgunned, they turned to technology to level the playing field. One of their most cunning strategies was to exploit the use of personal phones by Russian troops. With communication equipment shortages, Russian soldiers resorted to their personal phones, unwittingly revealing their positions. This allowed the Ukrainians to detect their locations and launch targeted missile strikes, proving that even the most basic technology can be weaponized in ingenious ways. But the use of technology didn't stop there. we saw how social media intelligence became a vital tool in this conflict. Ukrainian officials successfully analyzed social media posts to reveal the location of a pro-Russian base. In the information age, every social media post is a potential clue, every status update a possible lead. In the hands of the right people, these seemingly innocuous pieces of data can have significant implications on the ground. Yet, technology was a double-edged sword. The Russian forces, too, were able to identify and strike a munitions factory by analyzing footage from a Ukrainian news channel. This shows that while technology can empower, it can also expose vulnerabilities, making the balance of power ever so delicate. In conclusion, the conflict between Russia and Ukraine has illustrated that technology has irrevocably changed the face of warfare. From the use of personal phones to social media intelligence, each side has leveraged technology to their advantage, changing the rules of engagement. Technology had indeed become the new frontier in warfare. As the dust settles, we find ourselves asking, what lies ahead in this conflict? The Russian-Ukrainian conflict, like all conflicts, remains unpredictable and is hinged on a myriad of factors. However, tracing the current developments allows us to outline a few probable scenarios. One possibility is a drawn-out conflict, testing the endurance of both Russian and Ukrainian forces. Confidential documents point towards significant hurdles being encountered by both sides. Russian ground forces are showing signs of fatigue with limited backup available, while Ukrainian air defenses have been extensively drained. This could culminate in a conflict with no clear victor. Even in this daunting scenario, Ukraine's tenacity shines through. Outnumbered and outgunned, the Ukrainian military has showcased a remarkable ability to evolve and innovate under pressure. Through cunning tactics and capitalizing on Russian errors, they've managed to deal significant damage to the invaders. This raises the possibility that a long-term conflict may not necessarily favor the larger, better-equipped Russian forces. However, the war isn't confined to the battlefield. The role of the international community in shaping the conflict's trajectory is paramount. Sanctions against Russia have been far-reaching and impactful, with organizations like the International Ice Hockey Federation excluding Russian and Belarusian teams from competitions. These sanctions could compel Russia to explore the potential of a diplomatic solution. This would necessitate significant compromises from both parties and is likely to require international mediation. Yet, given the high stakes and deep-rooted animosities, achieving such a resolution could be a daunting endeavor. The road ahead is shrouded in uncertainty as the world watches, waits, and hopes. As we journey through this conflict, it's time to reflect. We find ourselves at the crossroads of history and ethics, grappling with questions that have no easy answers. What does this conflict tell us about the ethics of warfare? War is undoubtedly a harsh reality of our world, yet the ways in which it's conducted have profound implications. We've seen how strategies and tactics, from the use of deception to the targeting of specific units, have shaped the course of this conflict. But at what cost? And who bears the brunt of these decisions? Then there's the international community. Its role in conflict resolution is undeniable. But are we doing enough? Or are we in some ways bystanders to the unfolding drama? We've seen sanctions, diplomatic negotiations, and even suspensions from international sporting events. But have these actions brought us any closer to a resolution? Or have they merely shifted the dynamics of the conflict? And we mustn't forget the role of technology. It's reshaping warfare as we know it, from the use of open-source intelligence to the reliance on outdated air defenses. But is this a path we want to tread? Is there a point where the technological advances that were once seen as progress become a Pandora's box that we can't close? These are not questions with simple solutions. They require introspection, dialogue, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. In the grand scheme of history, this conflict is but a chapter. Yet it's a chapter that holds lessons for us all. In a more real conclusion, if Russia's goal was that it was announced, and its true goal of the war of occupying the west side of the bridge from Crimea to Ukraine and secure a foothold not too close to NATO, but close enough to have complete control of Crimea and the Black Sea, then sadly, for the point of view of Westerners, it seems Russia may have possibly won this war. We thank all our dear listeners and viewers for watching and hope you may have learned something. Feel free to let us know how we can better improve our channel by leaving a comment. We hope you all have a lovely evening. Thank you and good night.